All right, welcome back to One True Podcast. Zach Smith with me as always. Zach, how are you doing?
It's a beautiful day. I'm looking forward to heading out to Colorado, maybe getting in a mountain, doing some stuff out there. Looking forward to that. More so than ever, though, I'm happy to maybe turn this into a soccer podcast and ask our guest about Austin FC. Can they make the playoffs? Will Josh Wolf be around next year? That is what we're here. Those are the hard questions that we
I
want to
can
know,
just
right?
see people popping off and not listening anymore. Yeah, we have Mike Craven with us today. Mike's been at Dave Campbell's Texas football for 3 years. He was at the Austin American Statesman prior to that. I guess, Zach, that's where you and Mike cross paths, obviously.
And Mike, maybe you've heard this before, but dave-aranda is an Austin FC fan to bring this full circle.
Oh,
You know,
wow.
Yeah.
he's been to a couple Austin FC games. They hooked him up with tickets, and I guess like probably most people in Austin, he didn't really care about the on-field product. He was more talking about the stadium and the atmosphere and all of it. So yeah, but dave-aranda's an Austin FC fan as much as you can be.
That's a great story idea. Just go watch a soccer game with Dave Aranda in a stadium, see what he's like as a normal man. Austin FC's kind of a sore subject for me these days. The fan base drives me crazy online, especially. But yeah, it was a fun year. That's where Zach and I spent a lot of time in the press box, and then he also was at the Hill Country News, which is the area I grew up in. Always followed him there. I'm jealous you're going to Colorado. I'm going to the Hilltop. SMU, TCU, the Battle of the Iron Skillet, not as pretty as Boulder. So you win the week 4 trip.
Definitely, and I'll be joining Zach there. So yeah, that'll be fun. As much as we could sit here and talk about football, let's talk about football. Yeah, guys. So obviously, as y'all mentioned, Baylor's Big 12 opener does come at Colorado. The Buffaloes, one of 4 new Big 12 teams. Of course, they used to be in the Big 12. So to me, this shapes up as a pretty interesting toss-up kind of game. I feel like the betting line reflects that. I think Baylor was a 1.5 point favorite to start, and then I looked again yesterday, and Colorado was a 1.5 point favorite. So we'll see how it ends up at the end of the week. But what do you feel like the key is for Baylor to try to get a win on the road in Boulder? And you think the Bears will get it done?
Yeah, I mean, for me, Colorado feels like a tremendous 7-on-7 football team that's still trying to figure out how to be an 11-man football team. They have great wide receivers. I think Shedeur Sanders is one of the best quarterbacks in the country, probably going to be a top 5, top 10 draft pick, depending on how the NFL draft sets up. I think their secondary is pretty good. Obviously, Travis Hunter, one of the best cornerbacks in the country, a two-way player there. I think Shiloh's out, so maybe that hurts their secondary a little bit. So for me, for Baylor to win this football game, it's just going to come down to doing what Nebraska did and to a little bit what Dakota State did the week before. And that's just kind of bully them in the trenches, right? Like Colorado isn't deep along the defensive line. I don't think the offensive line is all that improved. Their left tackle's a true freshman who's still 18 years old. So this is an opportunity for Dave Aranda to get funky. Like he does the weird stuff on defense with the creepers and the simulated pressures. Like go confuse that offensive line, confuse Shedeur Sanders, get after them. And then offensively, you just got to figure out a way to establish the run. I know that's not going to be Jake Spavital's bread and butter usually, but against this matchup, it just feels like you can let that offensive line lean forward and establish a run game, shorten the game a little bit, and then see what your quarterback's got on top of that.
Zach?
To me, there are two keys to Baylor winning this game, and one is obviously the quarterback. Right now, we don't necessarily know who is starting. Like I would lean Sawyer Robertson would get the nod over Daquan Finn, who was hurt last week, and it's kind of amazing how quickly the Baylor fan base has turned, in favor of Sawyer. People were getting Daquan's name tattooed on them before the season started, and then 2 games into the season, like all of a sudden everybody is on Sawyer, and rightfully so. I mean, he looked
Hey,
awesome
Zach,
against.
fans are fickle.
Well, yes, but like Daquan was the savior, right?
Yeah,
And all of a sudden, you're right. Fans are fanatics, right?
hmm
But I think Sawyer is going to start Right. That would be my guess, and I think he obviously gives them a good chance to win. And Mike said establish the run. They obviously did that with Bryce in Washington, and having him back, I think, is going to be huge. And then the second key is the secondary, and Mike mentioned Travis Hunter and Shadur Sanders. This is probably the best offense that Baylor has faced this year. And yeah, the statistics say Baylor's defense is one of the best. But the passing game, the secondary really hasn't been tested at all this year, and they're going to face a test against Shadur and Travis and all of them, Jimmy Horn, unlike anything they've seen this year. So, and when they were tested, Caden Jenkins got a couple pass interference calls against Utah. So, like, the sample size is small and it's not particularly good. So, I'm curious to see how those couple things turn out for Baylor against Colorado.
So what you're telling me is that Colorado has a better passing game than Air Force? Are you kidding? Uh,
I don't like to watch football like I'm in the 1950s, Bryce. We've
yeah.
talked about this
Oh,
before. That,
he was hating it last week,
oh
Mike.
my gosh.
And I was sitting there talking about the beauty of the blocking and I guess I was showing my age, but
Although knowing Mike, he probably likes the triple option, right?
Love the triple option.
Oh
My
gosh.
little brother won a couple state titles at Liberty Hill. We worship the slot T in the Craven household.
nice, nice. Sometimes it's hard to follow the ball. Uh, yeah, so you guys kind of hit on it. Obviously, Colorado's a very buzzy team. Ever since Deion had got there, Coach Prime. There's been more attention brought to Colorado since his arrival, probably since the days of Cordell Stewart and 1990 national championship, those kind of days.
Rashawn Salam.
Yeah, Rashawn Salam. Yeah, that's a
That was
good
my that
one.
was
That's
that
a
was my guy.
black
I had
one.
his, that was I think that was the first jersey I owned. He was drafted by the Chicago Bears. Had me a Rashawn Salam jersey. Those are good days.
Nice, nice. Yeah, so I mean, back in the 90s, they had some buzz, but really haven't since now. Um, but on the field, last year the Buffs go 4-8. This year they're 2-1, but of course whiff on a big opportunity against Nebraska. That would have given, I think, Deion maybe kind of a signature win. So my question is this: do you guys think Coach Prime can win in Boulder, win big, and or is he just flying over on his way to another job?
Yeah, I tend to go the flyover route. I have some personal history covering Deion Sanders just with the Prime Prep Academy and what went on there. And even back then, right, you would ask him for comment, you would ask him for interviews, you'd then write the story after he ignored you, and then he'd call you and get mad at you for not getting hit quotes and telling the whole story. He's always kind of been this way, right? He's already banning reporters from the Denver Post. He started his tenure by throwing most of his team under, a Louis bus when he got there. I just think he's very self-serving. I think
Mm,
his son tends to be very self-serving. I mean, what chance did he have otherwise, right? I mean, we saw it with the way he threw his offensive line under the bus after the Nebraska game, not shaking hands of the quarterback. Um, I just have always thought for Deion, this is just a 2-year experiment. This is just a way to get Shador a bunch of money, to get Travis maybe a Heisman Trophy, to elevate himself into maybe an NFL assistant or something like that. If he was going to be at Colorado for a long period of time, he would recruit differently than the way he's recruiting. He doesn't go to high schools. He doesn't go to camps. He doesn't have kids. Like he just doesn't do what you would need to do to lay the foundation for a football program, and that leads me to believe that he won't be there as soon as his son's not.
mm. Zach?
Yeah, Mike is spot on. I think it starts really like the proof is in the recruiting. Like if you don't recruit high schools and you don't build that base, like you're not building a program to where it's sustainable for more than a couple of years because the transfer portal can only do, I think, so much we've seen so far. So yeah, I don't think he's long for Boulder. I could see him starting next year, maybe not finishing next year, but like where is he going to go? Like he's not, you know. Florida would be hilarious for a bunch of reasons, but like he's an NFL guy, I think he would be better suited in the NFL. So yeah, I don't think he's long for Boulder, and yeah, I think the it's already being laid that he's going to be on his way out sooner rather than later, I think.
You mentioned the kind of the prickly nature he's had with the media at times. The irony there is he's so good in press conferences and that kind of thing. I mean, he's colorful, he's honest a lot of times. I mean, funny, I mean, he kind of owned Big 12 media days. And then to Mike's point, we would do these little after the big press conference breakout sessions. And they're not on the schedule, but every coach would walk off the dais and there'd be a group of reporters there to get a little bit more from them. And Deion was the only one who did not end up doing that little breakout session. And the SID was, kind of apologetic. It was like, look, we got to go to ESPN, yada, yada, yada. But I mean, I do think he just operates, to the beat of his own drum. And I do think y'all kind of hit on it. I mean, he's probably bound for the NFL at some point. I guess I will play devil's advocate on the recruiting thing. I mean, I do feel like the transfer portal is the way recruiting is going a lot of times. Now, you still have to build your core through high schools, but I think there are coaches like Deion who are trying to see if they can build a winning team just by going all portal, like leaning into it. And uh, they've gotten some hits and some misses in that regard.
It just feels lazy.
Yeah.
When you have Deion Sanders' name, when you have that cachet, when Colorado's got Travis Hunter and Shador Sanders, think of the event it would be for Deion to be at local high schools or at big time high schools with big recruits. Like if he did all that kind of stuff, they would have a foundation for after Shador being gone, for after Travis being gone.
Yeah.
But everything he's done so far is to make the team as good as it can be while Shador is there.
Mm.
And it just feels like, and Prime Prep was the exact same way. It's a way to elevate the Sanders family. Anything else that happens is great, right? If other positives happen, that's cool. But the main goal here is to make Deion and his family look as good as it can. And that's been true for every single stop that he's made so far. I think the thing that strikes me about Deion is that he's sensitive. Like even I was a Braves fan growing up because I had TBS, right? Even going back to when he's pouring champagne on McIver's head or whatever that was back in the 90s. Like he's never dealt well with pushback. He's never dealt well with any type of criticism. And we've seen that. And if you're going to be a college football coach, you are going to get a lot of criticism. Like that is part of the job. That's why you're making millions of dollars a year. And he doesn't handle that well. And I don't know how he would survive another 4-8 season. And then his son's not there. And then they go 4-8 again. Like, what's the point of Deion after a while? And I think that, it just kind of runs thin a little bit. And he just won't have anything to keep him there anymore. Why would he be in Colorado?
And to kind of, follow up on that, like he is entertaining in press conferences. He's doing that when he gets a question he likes, when he gets a question that's not necessarily negative about his program or like, hey, why does your offensive line suck? Well, hey, why do you work for CBS? All of that, so like he does own the press conference. He is very entertaining when he gets a question or something that he can talk about where he can kind of pontificate, in a positive way, I guess.
Just ask him about Affleck and he's good.
As Mike was sitting there talking about coaches who are colorful and can own a press conference and yet very sensitive, I could not help but have some PTSD flashbacks to a certain women's basketball coach that used to reside in Waco and whose name I shall not mention. But yeah, I've been there. So
we all know that. We all know those types. They're littered in this. They're littered in this profession. It's what's so ironic about the profession preaching toughness and facing adversity as much as they do, right? We got to block out the outside noise. You don't listen to those guys. They're just living in their dad's basement. They don't know anything. And then they're like calling me 20 minutes later to complain about my column. Like
Oh
that's just
yeah.
that's how it's always gone.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. Well, let's move on. So things can change really in a hurry in college football. Couple seasons back, TCU found itself in the national championship game in Sonny Dykes' first season there. He was the toast of Fort Worth. And now, last week, the Frogs blow a 3 touchdown lead to UCF in their Big 12 opener. And there's a lot more grumbling about Sonny among the TCU fans. So is he officially on the hot seat, or is that still a little premature?
I think he's on the pre-hot seat, right? Like this year sets up how hot his seat is in 2025. Um, I think he achieved too much too soon, honestly, right? Like,
Mm,
I mean, you never want to, it's not like he was going to lose purposely to like reset expectations or anything, but I think there is a curse from getting to the national championship game so quickly with a team that was so old, right? Like they had to reset everything after that year. Like they lost their best quarterback, their best running back, their best offensive lineman, their best wide receiver, their best defensive lineman, their best linebacker, their best corner, and their best safety.
yeah.
Right? Like there's no denying that they lost their best player at every single position group. Even in the transfer portal, that takes time to reset. And then on top of that, I'm not convinced he got the offensive coordinator hire right after Riley left to go to Clemson. The red zone offense really struggled last year. This year Josh Hoover's looked great at quarterback, but they're up 21 in the second half and can't run the ball. Right?
Mm,
They don't even try. Like they get the ball, they're up 21, 3 straight passes, they punt it. Like they're just not able to be balanced in a way that they were with Kendre Miller before. So much of being a head coach is surrounding yourself with the right people, and there's a lot of regimes that have been duped by making the wrong hire. And I do wonder for Sonny, he's made a change at defensive coordinator. He was forced to make a change at offensive coordinator when Garrett Riley left, and I'm just not sure if he has the answers at both coordinator spots to turn this thing around. And I'm not sure that they're talented enough to go turn this thing around. At least not in the short term. Maybe one more offseason allows that, but the offensive line hasn't gotten better. Running back position isn't all that great. Right now, that they look like an old school Big 12 team that's got to go win games 52-48 because their defense isn't going to hold up and they can't run the ball.
mm.
Again, Mike has nailed it. But I think that obviously with SMU kind of going into a new conference, and obviously they're going to pump a bunch of money into there. You don't want TCU obviously wants to beat them. I think Baylor's got some recruiting momentum, and I know TCU obviously wants to beat them. And so I think that, yes, he is the burrito in the microwave. You haven't turned the microwave on, but it's getting ready to be hot. And
Mm.
so yeah, I don't think he's on the hot seat this year, but like Mike said, maybe next year. And I think of dave-aranda in 2021. He won that Big 12 title, and then everybody left, and those were rules guys, and they kind of went back down. So like, does that 1 year of really, really good success give you a longer leash? I think it does, but you've also got to kind of show what you got and recruit and build and coach and all of it. And I think both dave-aranda and Sonny Dykes are kind of in the same trajectory, if that makes any sense.
The problem with the burrito in the microwave is that there's always like you get the edges, they might be scalding hot, and then the middle is like still frozen or whatever. I mean, that's probably like Sunny in terms of there's probably TCU fans out there who are still very gung ho for Sunny, but yeah, then there's those that are ready to send him out on the next boat. I will say to Mike's point about it's starting to heat up. If they go out and lose to SMU this week, wouldn't you say
Yeah.
that dials it up another few notches?
Yeah, because as a college football fan, your happiness is directly correlated to the misery of your neighbors, right? Like Zach's a Michigan State guy, right? Like the worse Michigan is doing, the better it is to be a
Mm.
Michigan State fan. I went to UTSA. Texas State being awesome makes you being a UTSA fan not that fun, and it makes you as a fan go like, why are they passing us up? And TCU's lost their quarterback commitment to SMU. SMU's now kind of a peer. They're on the same playing field as them for the first time in my lifetime, right? Like since the death penalty, SMU and TCU are playing on the same field again. And that's scary. Baylor's starting to recruit well, as Zach mentioned, and that's another peer that you're competing against. And so I think if you're TCU, you're looking around and you go, okay, SMU's making some moves. Here's Baylor getting some talent. Like, what are we doing? Like, how are we positioning ourselves to go win this new look Big 12? Because if you're TCU, you look around and you go, Texas is gone, Oklahoma's gone. Why shouldn't we be the top program in this conference? Like, we have the most money. We have DFW in our back pocket. Like, why wouldn't we be the year in favorite? And instead, we're losing to UCF at home. But it's thin margins, right? Like, TCU went 6-1 in one possession games in 2022. Like, they won almost every coin flip except for that Big 12 championship game that didn't end up mattering. They're 0-5 since in one
Wow.
score games. So
Yeah.
like, they're just not winning. I mean, y'all were there for that Baylor TCU crazy game in 2022. Like, they just had some magic that they don't have anymore for whatever reason. And that can make you go from hotshot coach to what are we doing here very quickly. Like, unless you're Georgia, where you can just beat teams by 30 most weeks, like, it's going to be small margin football, and TCU's just not winning those small margins anymore.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, just to maybe dive down this rabbit hole a little bit deeper, do you guys think that there are TCU fans who are like, man, we should have never gotten rid of Gary?
No, I think that's a step too far. I think that's a step too far. I think there's parts of Gary that they miss.
The
He was great.
defense, the
Yes,
defense.
he was great defensively. He was really good talent acquisition guy, right? Like, he was tremendous at finding the 3 stars that end up becoming first and second round draft picks. Like, that's what that whole roster was in 2022, was the Kendre Millers and the D Winters and the Hodges Tomlinsons. Like, there was the Quentin Johnstons, but like he was more of an exception than a rule. I think that's the part TCU is missing. I think it's part that Baylor's been missing, honestly, since Matt Rule as well. Like, who's the next group of players? Like, who's the next stars? Like, at Baylor, who's the Terrell Bernards? Who's the Jalen Petries? At TCU, who are the D Winners? Who are the Hodges Tomlinsons? Where's the Max Duggans? It's replacing those guys that they got to figure out. This is a talent game as much as anything. Like, we put way too much into the head coaches because they're the ones that stay constant in this sport. But this is still about the Janes and the Joes. Like, it is about the players on the football field. Baylor hasn't replaced those stars, and TCU hasn't either, and we've seen the results kind of come back to earth because of it.
Yeah. Players make coaches look better. There's no question about it. I mean, I was so impressed with Max Duggan that year that I gave him my Heisman vote. So, I mean, there you go.
He
Hard
got
to,
beat out. He got beat out going into the season.
right? Yeah.
Still one of the craziest things ever.
Oh, that was an amazing story. Just that whole TCU team, really. All right, so the game of the week in the Big 12, and one of the better games in college football this week should be number 12 Utah traveling to Stillwater to play number 14 Oklahoma State. Supposedly, I guess Cam Rising is expected to return at quarterback for the Utes. He went out with an injury in the Baylor game a couple weeks ago. Meanwhile, for Oklahoma State, Alan Bowman is just tearing it up. Had a 5 touchdown game against Tulsa. Granted, it's Tulsa, but still 5 touchdown passes. So who do you guys like in this one? And do you think it is a preview of what we might see at Jerry World later in the year?
I never get to talk about non-Texas football, so I'm appreciative of this platform here. You want to know how long Cam Rising's been in college football? I broke his flip from Oklahoma to Texas while on my bachelor party of my first marriage, right? Like I got married, divorced, and married again, and Cam Rising is still playing college football. He's been around forever. I like Utah here. I think Oklahoma State's run last year was mostly schedule based. I mean, they got every flip of the draw that they could possibly hope for last year, and that allowed them to kind of like roadmap their way to the Big 12 championship game. Ollie Gordon hasn't been as explosive this year for whatever reason. And I guess in my mind, Alan Bowman's still the Texas Tech quarterback that I can't get out of my head how bad he was at times in Lubbock. And so if Cam Rising is healthy, which I think he is, I think if it was a big game last week, he would have played. I think he's going to be able to kind of tough up through it. I think Utah wins this one. I think they cover. I think it's going to be Utah, Kansas State in the Big 12 championship game.
I disagree. I think Oklahoma State's going to win this game. I cannot get that Utah offense out of my head, even with Cam Rising in there. Like, yes, Cam Rising makes Utah a completely different team. If Cam Rising is not playing, Utah is, not even touching, the top 25. And even with Cam Rising in there, Utah needed some big plays and some Baylor mistakes to really move against Baylor, which maybe is an above average defense, but I think Oklahoma State just has too many weapons to that is going to kind of eat Utah alive. And if Cam Rising is not fully healthy, I think that obviously, changes some things for Utah offensively. So as far as this being a preview for Arlington, man, the Big 12, I think, is more wide open than I think any of us predicted. UCF looks pretty good. Arizona State and BYU probably aren't going to win the Big 12, but they're still undefeated, so you got to give them some credit there. And Kansas State looks really good. So, you know, I'm looking at next week, right? When Oklahoma State plays Kansas State for a preview. But yeah, this is going to be a good game, and I'm picking Oklahoma State to come out on top of the Utes.
So we make our picks. Generally, I send the picks to Zach on Friday in terms of the college games that we're picking, and a lot of times I don't think about who I'm picking until that time. And I'm sitting here listening to y'all, and I'm like Mike swaying me, and then Zach starts talking, and I'm like, okay, well that makes a little sense too. So you guys are really got me on the fence on this, but I tend to kind of agree more with Mike. I feel like one thing Utah does very well, and it's very similar to K-State, is they don't beat themselves a lot of times. There's not a lot of silly penalties, not a lot of mistakes. Um, that said, Stillwater is a very tough place to go into and play. Those fans are right on top of you. They're loud, they're crazy. I have seen so many like really good Baylor teams go into Stillwater and just fall flat on their face. And when I say fall flat on their face, I'm thinking about a time where Bryce Petty tripped on his own shoelaces as he was about to walk into the end zone and just literally fell on his face. But yeah, I mean, so I don't know. I think Utah's defense and its ability to not beat itself is kind of what makes me lean toward the Utes. And I do think that maybe them and K-State are probably the best teams, but obviously it's not going to surprise me if Oklahoma State pulls this one out. And as Zach said, I think we're going to get a lot of just games where you're like, what? In the Big 12. I mean, to a certain extent, for me, UCF over TCU was like that. I mean,
I think UCF was like a 1.5 point favorite, which kind of proves how good Vegas is at this whole thing at all times.
They
Like
know what they're doing.
it's just incredible. That's why the hotels keep getting nicer and nicer. What I think is interesting about this Utah Oklahoma State game is it's a perfect illustration of what the Big 12's become. When we all started in this bit, like it's been the Mike Leach Big 12 forever, and it's got that reputation as no defense and it's 51-48 air raid, hair on fire. It's not that anymore. Like you look around the Big 12 and it's bully ball. It's teams running the football. It's playing really good defense. And Utah and Oklahoma State are two of the four favorites in this conference, and that's kind of the football that they play. The last few champions have played that kind of football, including Baylor a couple years ago. And so, maybe as this conference gets more and more shine, because one of the champion is going to the playoff, maybe the national narrative around the conference starts changing because it is more of a physical hit you in the mouth style of play than even the SEC anymore, right? Like it's closer to Big 10. The SEC's become what people think of as the Big 12, right? In terms of the explosive spread, score a bunch of points. They just have NFL defensive and offensive linemen there, so we don't bash them for it. But the Big 12 has become, I think, it's my favorite style of football to play because it reminds me of like 90s football before the air raid took over.
Yeah, I like it. I like it.
Yeah.
Well, so Mike, you mentioned you'll be at the Iron Skillet game. Is that one in Dallas or Fort Worth?
Dallas on the hilltop.
Yeah, that'll be fun. We'll see if Sonny's seat gets a little hotter. I don't know. I mean, what's the spread on that one?
TCU is favored by 2.5 in a spread that completely shocks me. I thought it'd be closer to TCU -7. And maybe this will be one of those where Vegas proves me wrong, and this is why they have more money than I do. But we're gonna find out because I'm definitely placing my money on the TCU -2.5 side of this thing.
Speaking of Vegas, we actually saw you in Vegas walking through the casino one night. So
Yeah, I got into the Golden Nugget Challenge when I was up there, so got to play 7 bets a week through my proxy in Vegas. So 8-6 so far through the first 2 weeks of it. So on the plus side, it's a lot of fun. I really enjoy the handicap. One day I'm going to get a job working sports in Vegas, and it's going to be either the greatest thing or the worst thing that's ever happened to me.
love it, love it.
Mike, have you been to
Zach,
Boulder? Have you been to Boulder?
Yep. Yeah,
Where do
not
we
to
eat?
cover a game. That is not something I know. I've been to Boulder as a college student. I had a buddy who went to Boulder, so I went up there a couple of times. We were like 21 years old, so we ate at like McDonald's and stuff. You know what I mean? So I am not as familiar with Boulder enough to give you restaurant
we'll
recommendations,
have
but
to
it
do a
is
little more research on that.
that drive
It
from
would.
Denver to Boulder is one of the top drives in the country.
Hmm, can't wait.
Beautiful.
Can't wait.
Yeah, should be a lot of fun. Well, Mike, thanks for hopping on, man. We appreciate it.
Absolutely, guys. Anytime.